It's just allergies,
Okay.
dust, pollen.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, teachers. I see Mara-Lise and Lebo Hang have just joined us. Good afternoon on this cold afternoon in Joburg. I don't know where you are at the moment. Let's give it 1 minute to let some more people come in from the waiting room, and then we'll start the webinar for today. I see Christine has come in. Wonderful. Okay. Thokozile, are you back?
I'm back.
Okay, great. Well, let's make a start to today's webinar, which is offered to you by Oxford University Press and helps us to introduce you to Oxford EduZone. It's presented by Flying Cows of Josie. My name is Josine Overdevest. I'm the Managing Director of Flying Cows of Josie. And with me today as the facilitator and senior flying cow is Thokozile Mokoena. Thokozile, would you please show yourself? Good to see you again. And from Oxford University Press, we have Derek Ballantyne with us. So good afternoon, Derek.
Hi, everyone.
So what I wanted to do first, and this is for the people who are with us for the first time, I just want to share my screen with you because you might need a few tips and tricks to find your way around the screen. So I hope everybody can see my screen now. On your right-hand side, you'll find some functionalities, including the chat that we'll be using and the handouts, which is also useful for you because there's quite a few handouts today that you can take with you. Important if you want to engage in the webinar, at the bottom of your screen, let me do it like this, you'll be able to find a button for your camera, for your mic and for your camera. So that's important information to know. So what I'll do now is stop sharing this screen, and we're going to jump straight into today's webinar because we've got a lot of content to deal with. Let's start at the beginning. Okay. Okay, Thokozile, let me know when my screen is visible.
It's visible.
Okay, thank you very much. So today the topic of today is digital learning skills in practice and how we use Oxford EduZone to do that. So today is webinar 5 in a series of 5, which means today's the last webinar. And I will be sad to not be seeing a number of you who've been with us from webinar number 1. So first of all, what's relevant is if you could please fill out the workshop attendance register. And Thokozile will put the link to the workshop attendance register in the chat. So you only have to click on that and then you can complete it. You can also, if you want to do that, scan the QR code that you see on the right side on my slide. And I just want to let you know that all the participants that complete both the workshop attendance register and the workshop feedback form will receive a certificate of attendance via email. Okay, so what we'll be looking at today. I'll first take you through the training objectives for today. We'll have an icebreaker. Then we'll play our video of Oxford EduZone. And after that, we'll have a review of the first 4 webinars. So for people who haven't attended or have not attended all of these webinars, this is a nice refresher and get you up on the details. And for people who've attended all 4 of them, this is also good to have a bit of the repetition. We'll close that review off with a short quiz. And then we'll reflect a bit on how the topics from these various webinars link together. We'll then delve a bit deeper in the teaching change frame, something that we've been taking with us from the very first webinar. And we'll offer you a digital learning lesson checklist. Throughout this webinar, we will be either showing you examples of how you can put your digital learning skills into practice through a video, or you'll be engaging in quizzes or other digital activities to flex your own digital skills. So that's our agenda for today. And hopefully by the end of the workshop, you will recall the topics from our previous 4 webinars, realize how the topics of these previous webinars are linked, have a deeper understanding of how the teaching change frame guides your professional development for digital learning, know how to analyze your digital lessons, and realize how Oxford EduZone supports you on your digital learning journey. As always, we have our guidelines for the workshop, so let's agree that we appreciate and respect each other and commit our full and timely attention to the workshop. This is the sign for a camera. So we switch on our camera during interactive activities. It's always nice to see who else is with us in the webinar. And you have the option to switch off your camera during presentations, also to help you save some of your bandwidth. The sign for a microphone. Please switch on your mic if you want to speak. And please keep your mic switched off while listening to a presentation or a discussion by the other participants. The sign for the hand, oh, I realized I forgot to show that in the chat. I showed you that on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got the chat opportunity. If you go to the bottom of that screen, you'll see where you can type your messages. There you will also find an emoji for emojis. And you'll find a hand. If you click the hand, that comes up and Tokozile can see that you've got a question. Because questions are welcome. And you can either raise your hand in the chat or put the question itself in the chat. And Tokozile will alert me when there are questions so that we stop and answer those for you. And mistakes are welcome. That's how we learn. All materials presented will be made available after the session. And I think what's important to share, because we got a question yesterday in the WhatsApp group from people who have not attended all previous webinars. And Oxford University Press will make a link available where the recordings from the previous sessions will be found. If you click on the handouts, you'll see the documents with the slides for all the previous sessions. And most importantly, let's have some fun, because learning is fun. Okay, are there any questions so far?
We haven't got any.
Okay, great. So people who've been in the webinars with us from the beginning know this slide by now, but we like, we like to keep on asking this question. So because this past, it's already 2.5 years now, or it's at least more than 2 years that we had the school lockdowns and rotational schedules, and many of us were forced to fully embrace digital education. So how do you feel when you think about the roller coaster ride of the past 2 years? And we'll ask you again to please go to the chat and from the list of emojis, choose the one that best represents how you feel about actually working with digital skills in education. So are we getting any feedback in? How are people feeling? Okay, everybody seems to be quiet. No real input on what's been happening on your journey, on your digital learning journey. Okay. That's fine. Let's see if we can do it like this. So what I want you to do, we're going to do it in a different way, because all through these webinars, we've been talking about the teachers' digital learning skills. And what I would actually like to do is ask you about what you think about your learners' digital skills in the classroom. So what I want you to do is click on the link that's provided in the chat. So it's a bit.ly link, so you can also type in bit.ly/18MayOUP. Or alternatively, you can go to www.menti.com and type in the ID number, and preferably do that on a separate browser window. And I'll open that window for you. So please go to, have you posted the link in the chat, Tokozile?
I just did. It's in the chat.
Great, thank you. Fantastic. And then we'll look up. Okay, so I'm going to present it. So maybe Tokozile, do you see?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, but are you also opening a second screen? So do you see what the other participants see? Oh,
Yes.
it's not the right question yet. Okay. Okay. This one first. Okay. Oh, the questions are already getting in. Fantastic. So the question is, how do you rate your learners' digital skills? You rate them excellent, getting there, room to improve, or poor? I see that 4 people so far have submitted an answer to this. So would the other people please also submit their answers? So we can see what kind of learners our participants have got in the classroom. Okay, no more input. Then we'll move to the next question. And that's actually where we ask, what do you need to do? What do your learners need to improve? What do your learners need to improve their digital skills? And we had someone saying that the learners were already doing an excellent job, but for others there was still room to improve, or they were getting there. So what do those learners who are getting there need to do to become excellent? And that learner where there is room to improve, what else do they need to do? Access, data, persistence, integrity. That's an interesting term. I would actually be interested to learn a bit more about what's meant by that. But I'm sure other participants also have ideas about this. So remember, to participate, go to this website address, menti.com. Use the code 78429737 so you can participate. And we can create a nice word cloud together. Okay. Can I ask, oh, perfect. There's some more things coming in. Persistence, internet access, more resources, flexible curriculum. That's an interesting one. Data. Internet access. Okay, wonderful. So I'll give you half a minute more for the others to please also contribute. Infrastructure. Digital literacy skills. Now we're talking. Now the information is coming in. Thank you. So you see, access is important. Data, infrastructure, persistence, and skills. Yeah, and obviously, you know, what we talk about in these webinars, I think it's clear for a lot of people what the issues in this country are for a lot of schools in bringing digital into the classroom. Infrastructure is an issue. Access and internet access are issues in combination with data. The curriculum, that is something that's relevant. More resources that they can use. But if we look at it at ourselves from a teacher's perspective, you know, there are some things that we do have control over and others we don't. And teaching them digital literacy skills is actually something that we as teachers have in our hands, not just as a technology or a CAT teacher, but to make sure that we apply digital applications and resources in all the lessons that we provide our learners with. And that's actually some of the overarching topic of these webinars. Okay, thank you very much. So let's go back here and go back to our presentation so that we can delve right in there. So I'm going back to the presentation. Okay. And our quote for today, where we talk about that technology will never replace great teachers, but in the hands of great teachers, technology is transformational. And I think that's also relevant for us to understand. We will always, you know, teachers will always be needed, because with just technology, we are not going to improve the lessons our learners learn, but it is a great mediator. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the video of Oxford EduZone. Will you please start the video, Thokozile?
Succeed with 360-degree teaching. Oxford EduZone is a digital platform providing learners, teachers, students, and lecturers with an easy way to keep ahead and succeed. We've listened to teachers and we've heard what you need. Introducing Oxford EduZone, an all-in-one 360-degree digital hub offering everything you need to deliver enhanced lessons. Are you struggling to capture the attention of your high schoolers? EduZone has done a lot of the hard work for you. Resources are linked to the curriculum, and questions in our assessment bank are clearly tagged so that you can find them easily. Make learning click. EduZone elevates your class textbooks into an active learning zone. Digitally enhanced ebooks offer colorful slideshows and videos that bring the content to life. Simulations and teaching videos explain difficult concepts so learners don't fall behind and get disheartened. Interactive activities with instant feedback show learners gaps in their understanding. It's like a toolbox for teachers. Get instant access to assessments and study material. EduZone gives you activities, question banks, self-marking tests, formative and summative assessments, and targeted assessments to allow for plenty of practice and remediation. Bring the world to your classroom. Do you know exactly how each one of your learners is doing at the touch of a button? EduZone gives you detailed feedback on your learners' progress. EduZone even helps learners keep track of their homework across different subjects. You'll never have to hear, "I left my book at home" or "school" again. Be the best teacher you can be. EduZone gives your learners the freedom to navigate backwards and forwards through the course themselves and become confident 21st century learners. Join the future of teaching. Contact Oxford University Press today or simply Google Oxford EduZone for more info.
Okay, thank you for that. I see that Lolila says that her screen was blank. Did others also not see the video? Or were you able to see it?
Saw it loud and clear, Josina.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sometimes it's, if you don't have enough bandwidth, then the video wouldn't be playing. Apologies for that, because I can understand that's a bit irritating. Okay, great. Okay, so what we do now is have a look at what we discussed in the first webinars. So our first webinar was called Teacher Professional Development for Digital Learning. And the core of what we presented there was the 2017 Department of Basic Education document called Teacher Professional Development Framework for Digital Learning. The purpose of that document is to provide guidelines for professional development to ensure that we have competent educators who use ICT to enhance teaching and learning, with an aim to define professional development for digital learning in an education system that seeks to improve access, quality, equity, redress, and efficiency. And one of the important premises that we took up from that webinar is that mere access to or skills in the use of digital tools and resources does not necessarily translate into effective teaching and learning. And that's what the whole framework, the DBE framework, is based on, to put it within the context of teaching and pedagogical strategies. So that's where we discussed the context and scope of the digital literacy skills that the framework seeks to address. And my question is, for people who haven't attended that first webinar, were you all aware of the existence of this document, of the DBE framework for teacher professional development for digital learning? Do you see any feedback, Thokozile?
Mozi M says no.
No. Okay, so also under handouts, the first handout you'll see is the framework. So you have an opportunity to delve into it a bit deeper if you want to. So what we look at in this, the context and scope for digital literacy skills for teachers, is looking at the 7 collective roles of teachers in a school. And in the frame, those are defined as a specialist in the phase, a subject or a practice, a learning mediator, interpreter and designer of learning programs and materials, leader, administrator and manager, scholar, researcher and lifelong learning, assessor, and as the last role is community, citizenship and the pastoral role. So those are the 7 collective roles of teachers in a school. And those offer the context for acquiring basic and highly developed digital literacy skills. So here you also see the minimum requirements for teacher education qualifications. And one of those is highly developed literacy, numeracy, and IT skills. So those have been added. And why are these contexts relevant and these requirements relevant? Because this is where you then look at the scope of the activity where you will be applying your digital literacy skills. So where do you need to have your digital learning competencies as a teacher? That's in professional growth, curriculum focus, and leadership. So professional growth, for example, also includes that you decide by yourself that you attend webinars like these, or you sign up for an additional course, or you become a member of a professional learning community. Leadership is also looking at how do I make sure that what I've learned and what I think is important that comes out of this framework is also shared with my peers, be it teachers in the same subject, be it in my school, be it in my district. So that's the leadership that you can show in digital learning competencies. And what we'll be talking about mostly here today is the curriculum focus. So how can I integrate digital tools and resources to enhance the learning objectives? How do I develop my learners' digital skills? How do I how do I develop their global awareness using digital communication? So this is the specific focus for the digital learning skills that we're looking at in this series. Are there any questions on this context and scope?
No, we haven't got any questions.
Okay. The next element that we then discussed in the framework for teacher professional development for digital learning was the TPEC framework, where we looked at the 3 knowledge areas as they are identified. That's content knowledge. That's what you as a teacher know specifically about your subject. So that's you as the subject specialist. There's an area where we look at pedagogical knowledge. So that's understanding what strategies do you employ to teach your subject. And that can be per topic. So it can be for this specific topic, I decide to just present the lesson as a lecture because this requires rigorous teaching. Or you can decide to have a discussion with your learners. Or you can decide to have a test to test the knowledge on this. The third knowledge area is technological knowledge. So that's your knowledge of digital tools and resources that are available to you. But more interesting is then to start looking at the overlapping areas. So that is the PCK, your pedagogical content knowledge. So you understand the content that needs to be taught. And you can use different pedagogical strategies to best deliver the lesson. The element here is technological pedagogical knowledge. That's knowing how digital tools and resources can enforce your pedagogical strategy. For example, you can say that you want to give your learners a quiz, and you know that there are interesting online quizzes available that you can use. So that's something that you would do under technological pedagogical content. This overlap area is looking at technological content knowledge. So that's an understanding how, in addition to maybe the textbooks that you've got in school, what other digital tools and resources are available that best that can enhance the understanding of the learner of your content. So it can be that. Sorry. Okay. So, for example, on Oxford EduZone, you'll find a library with the interactive textbooks. But those textbooks are not just PDFs online, but they also have a lot of additional resources like videos or images or audio recordings. So knowing that those are available and that those can enhance your lesson sits in the technological content knowledge area. And then what we always say, this is the sweet spot area. So that's technological, pedagogical content knowledge, or TPEC. And that's understanding how learners can deepen their subject knowledge through effective learning approaches supported by digital tools and resources. What's also important to always realize is this dotted purple line around the TPEC model, which speaks to the context in which you teach. For example, it's different. This whole TPEC model will be different for a teacher who is teaching in a fully online environment with learners that are all over the country, or maybe some of them even abroad, and even the teacher does not have all the colleagues at the same location. That's a different context from a teacher in a rural area with limited digital resources. So this is the context, which means that TPEC can be different for different learners and teachers in different contexts. Are there any questions on the TPEC model?
No questions.
No questions. Okay, and the last element we discussed was the teaching change frame. And the teaching change frame is basically looking at what elements, what is actually changing, maybe because it's a change frame. So what's changing? In the 21st century, what we said before, technology, let us not be driven by technology, but let's see how we can use technology as a mediator in teaching and learning. If you look at the teaching change frame, you can see different teaching styles. For example, here in the left bottom corner, we look at teaching, which makes limited use of digital tools and resources, and potentials also limited by the pedagogical strategies. Because here on the x-axis, if we look at pedagogy, I always find it a difficult word, so I prefer to say pedagogical strategy because somehow that comes easier out of my mouth. Because teaching in the 21st century doesn't just mean that we've got more access to digital tools and resources, but because we need to teach our learners different skills, we also need to start applying, or probably already doing that, to have more applicable 21st century teaching or pedagogical strategies. And those are more transformational strategies. So here we're moving from teacher-centered to much more learner-centered. So, and where the teacher is much more a facilitator. So if you think about 21st century transformative pedagogical strategies, we think about not just learner-centered, but also the more you move here, will challenge higher order thinking skills. we're looking at knowledge building, and we encourage much more learner independence and self-regulation. And with self-regulation, we mean, their own time management. We don't have to be on top of them all the time, but we give more responsibility in the learner's hand. And we also encourage multiple modes of interaction between learners themselves and between learners and teachers. And also we're integrating assessment more and more as a learning strategy. Now on the y-axis, we're looking at awareness and use of digital tools and resources. So here we have limited use of digital tools and resources. And when we move to digital teaching, we are making more effective use of digital tools and resources, but the potential might still be limited by the pedagogical strategy chosen. And if we move to this quadrant, which is digital learning, we're talking about effective use of digital tools and resources amplified by transformative pedagogical strategy. Now, what I do want to stress, what is important, it doesn't mean that, for example, this quadrant here is becoming outdated or not relevant, or if you are teaching here, that you're doing something wrong. Because remember, when we look back to TPEC and to our context, but also to our content knowledge and pedagogical knowledge, there might be areas where you say, well, to be honest, this works best if I lecture. We don't need a lot of digital tools and resources. So I might just use a PowerPoint presentation or show a video in class, but actually this requires rigorous teaching. So I do want to stress that not one of these quadrants is wrong or a regression. We just need to be aware of the context in which we do it. So, and also that's what we're talking about here, awareness and use of. And with use of, we're really talking about making effective use of the digital tools and resources. So we need to make sure that when we do use digital tools and resources, that they actually enhance the objective of the lesson. Let's not just use tools and resources just because they are there. The example I often use is an online teacher who said to me, you know what, and it was a geography teacher, and there's a lot of geography apps available. He said, and I was so excited by all those apps that I wanted to use them all in one lesson. And he said, and I found out that the learners were just confused by all these different apps, and I didn't meet the objective of the lesson because actually they didn't grasp the content that I was trying to share with them. So that's the digital change frame, the teaching change frame. Are there any questions or comments on that?
We haven't got any questions and comments.
Okay. So what I did have as an example still under TPEC, I'm just looking, I can do that under the time. So, for example, the example that we used under TPEC, just to show you a bit, what a different strategy, pedagogical strategy could look like when you use more digital tools and resources, is, for example, a life sciences cell anatomy lesson, where traditionally, as a teacher, you would probably walk through the cell's anatomy and basic functions of each organelle, and then you can reference the textbooks that you have and that the learners have available. You can then break the class into small groups, and each group will have to label their own diagram or cell anatomy and research a single process of the cell that they have to present to the class later on. And that is what each group does. So that's what really limited use of digital tools and resources. Now, if we look at TPEC and how we can do it differently, is that we can show learners simulations of animal cell anatomy for example, the Oxford EduZone library, where you've got the book on life sciences available with the different simulations. Again, you can break the class into small groups and have them collaborate on completing a check for understanding quiz, which you can present them via Oxford EduZone. Because Oxford EduZone, the learners can access that from home as homework, but you obviously can also use it in the classroom to facilitate classwork. And you can also include an interactive question that provides a diagram of a cell with blank labels and requires learners to drag and drop the proper labels in place from an answer key. The next step is then that you have each group use a device with recording capabilities. And then have each member of the group choose an organelle to personify and have them record each other explaining who they are or which organelle they are and why they are important for the cell. You can then have them upload this audio recording via Oxford EduZone, and you can decide to share that also with other learners, maybe via a Google Classroom interface that you've got available there. That means that learners can also then watch or listen to each other's recording and leave their comments in the right places. Does that clarify a bit how integrating TPEC in your lesson can change the lesson for you? Okay, if there are no questions, let's move on to what we discussed in webinar 2. And in webinar 2, we spoke about tips and tricks for digital learning. First of all, we started by talking about what opportunities, what actually the opportunities are of blended learning, because we also found that quite a few of the participants in the webinar, during COVID, they were maybe teaching fully online. Now they're back in the classroom, they're into hybrid teaching, they're into blended learning. So it is important to talk about what are the elements of that and what does it mean for our learners. So in short, blended learning combines online education materials and opportunities for interaction online with more traditional classroom methods. So some of the opportunities are that it offers convenience and flexibility, and it can enhance learning. It's shown that research shows increased depth of understanding and retention of course content. Learners can have more meaningful discussions, and there can be better emphasis on writing and technology skills. By even using digital applications in the classroom, learners are forced to work with digital. And what quite a few teachers have also found is that digital learning in a way can level the playing field, because it allows for learners to take a bit more time to think and reflect, but it also provides an opportunity for shy learners to interact much more in the classroom. It can help with the interaction between learners amongst themselves and between the teachers and the learners. You can try out all sorts of 21st century pedagogical transformative strategies. And also it helps with an administration for the teacher, because especially more basic levels of assessments can be done online. You can document it, like it already said in the Oxford EduZone video. No longer a learner can say, I've lost my homework, because it's all being tracked on the platform. So they build a digital footprint for your learners. And it offers the ability also to grade assessments and assignments online, taking that marking responsibility out of your hands. But with all these great opportunities also come some challenges. Not that that should keep us from digital learning, but it's just something that we need to take into account. One of those elements is the transactional distance. So the more we work digitally with learners and have them do work by themselves, the bigger the transactional distance is between the learner and the teacher. And in a way that can be positive, but for some learners it can also be very negative. And you would want, especially in high school, that interaction between the teacher and the learner amongst themselves is very important. this model was developed by Mr. Moore and specifically looked at distance learning. So remember UNISA, where previously, before online learning, you would get all your learning material delivered at home. You did your own work, and then you send it in for it to be marked by your lecturer, who you might never see. Or I don't know, maybe you could have some sessions regular now and then, but actually there's a huge transactional distance. So there's not a lot of dialogue between the learner and the teacher, and the content that you receive is very structured. So that's the setting in which the transactional distance is the biggest. Now, just for your understanding, the least transactional distance would be, for example, in a physical education class. Because all the learners and the teacher are together, it's a lesson that actually happens, and the content offered is not necessarily very well structured. So there's not a lot of transactional distance in a physical education class. And I find we also work with teachers who teach at a fully online school, and this is something that they and also their learners are struggling with. Because the learner sits by themselves the whole day. We know this, we remember this from COVID, by themselves. They don't engage with learners, and the bad thing or the downside is also that in a fully online school they haven't even met the other learners physically, and they're in all parts of the country, and the teachers are also in all different parts of the country. So they really need to work hard at providing more structure, but also find how can we engage with these learners more. And that's important because if we have the right balance in our transactional distance that encourages learner-centered learning, remember that's something that we want to encourage as a transformative pedagogy, but then that's more learner-centered. But we also want to reduce uncertainty by the learner. And we need to make sure that we keep motivating our learners and combat isolation. And I feel that's becoming a big problem if you don't address that in an online school. It's not good what we're picking up for the mental well-being of these learners. Okay, any questions on this transactional distance or any experience that you want to share or things that you picked up from an increasing transactional distance between you and your learners? Nope.
We've got nothing coming in.
Okay. Then we can look at, how do you deal with that? How do you make sure that you have a balanced transactional distance? And that's actually balancing your synchronous and your asynchronous activities. So your synchronous activities are live, real time, usually scheduled and facilitated instruction, and learning-oriented interactions. So all those moments when we engage with our learners as a group or individually, and also where learners work and learn together. This can be in the classroom and online. So I think that's important to know. So very simple, asynchronous activity is when you look at your class schedule at 9 o'clock in the morning, your first class comes in, they come into the classroom, you teach. That's a synchronous activity. This can also be an online lesson. That's also a synchronous activity. But synchronous is also when you meet with a learner individually, or when learners sit together in groups and work as groups. So those are all synchronous activities. It's happening live, it's real time. Asynchronous activities is when the learner works by themselves. So they read the textbooks, they watch a recorded lesson or webinar, as you might be able to do after this webinar, and you want to catch up on the previous webinars. It's them reading and writing assignments, it's doing research for projects, it can be online discussion forums, which doesn't necessarily have to happen in real time, and other learning activities that they can work on. So there, it's also important to find a balance between synchronous and asynchronous activities, especially taking into account again our 21st century transformative pedagogical strategies, which could find a balance between these two. Because if we want to work more learner-centered, that means that there will be a balance towards also asynchronous activities, where we give them assignments to work by themselves first before we start dealing with a certain topic in the classroom. And I just want to say that the platform like Oxford EduZone, so a digital content platform that you can use both in the classroom and online, facilitates balancing these two activities. So are there any questions on synchronous and asynchronous activities?
We haven't got any.
Okay. Now, obviously, you're interested in what now exactly were those tips and tricks for digital learning, apart from looking at it from a broader perspective. But then we took everybody through quite a number of topics that we're interested to look at. So it is keep it simple. That's the one. The first tip or trick, the tip actually is keep it simple. You know, this is where the light bulb comes up. So we discussed the concept of cognitive overload, where we made it clear that the human brain has a limited capacity to capture new information and new work. So we should do our best to make it as easy as possible. So keeping it simple is one of the things to do that. So, for example, before you start a lesson, you can already set a quiz so you can determine pre-existing knowledge, so that in your class you don't have to deal with all the topics that are part of or all the elements of the topic that you want to discuss, but just the elements that you picked up from in the quiz that your learners are struggling with. And if you look at, yeah?
The poll is open.
That shouldn't be. Why is the poll open?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so maybe close it again.
I'm not sure if the other attendees are seeing the poll.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes, says, can you please repeat the difference? Your message, Xolile, please repeat your message again. What you need your scene to repeat. I think she needed to repeat the difference between synchronized and asynchronized.
Okay. So synchronous is everything you do real time. So we are currently in a synchronous activity. I'm presenting and you are hearing me speak live. So you can ask a question, I can answer. This is a synchronous activity. So that's similar as to what you can do in your classroom. If you are teaching, your learners are in front of you, you are teaching, that's a synchronous activity. It can also be that your learners work together in a group in the classroom. That's also a synchronous activity. Or you have a one-on-one meeting with a learner, either in the classroom or online. That's also a synchronous activity. Now, as soon as after this webinar, Derek will share the link to the recording, and you decide to watch the recording of this webinar by yourself or maybe with some colleagues, then it's an asynchronous activity. So you decide by yourself at what time you do it. You might decide to stop the webinar halfway through and go make a cup of coffee, and you come back and you watch it again. So you decide in your own time when you're doing it. Does that make sense? Is that a good explanation for you, Olila?
She says it does. Thank you.
Good. Happy to hear that. Okay, so let's go back to the elements for keep it simple. So do a test to determine pre-existing knowledge. You can, for example, also do that on Oxford EduZone. But what's also very important is to chunk content into smaller parts and offer the information into bullet points. So, for example, if you use a PowerPoint presentation, don't have the whole PowerPoint full with words, because that's confusing. Also choose to present information in different ways, so both visually and verbally, using different techniques and media. But like I said before, don't use too many apps at the same time, because that's also confusing. Scaffold complex content. So maybe start with a story at the beginning and come back to that story in the ending of your story. Allow people time to read and process and discuss. And I think an important one is don't be afraid of silence. Because in that time, there is silence that gives a bit of time for your learners to process what you've just been discussing. So that's tip number 1. Keep it simple. Number 2 is let's work together. And that means creating a communicative learning culture with, for example, social media groups and online discussions that you can have your learner use in the classroom, but also by putting learners in charge of part of the lesson. So, for example, in a physical science lesson, you could task your learners or a group of your learners with conducting an experiment by themselves. They then just have to do the write down and maybe video record what they're doing and do their analysis afterwards. And they then present this specific experiment to the rest of the classroom. So put learners in charge of presenting part of the lesson. You can also set group assignments. On Oxford EduZone, there's the ability to set an assignment, not just for a class, but you can also give it to a group or even to an individual learner. But what is important in working together is to keep giving regular personalized feedback to learners in an online environment. The last trick that we discussed was have some fun. And that's really looking at providing interactive activities that can be fun. So icebreaker activities like we've just done with a word cloud or with an online poll or a test, puzzles or presentations. You can even these days take learners on a virtual field trip. For example, if you go to ThingLink, you can maybe set up a virtual field trip of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Offer assessment choice. So for some elements, they can do a quiz. For others, maybe they have to work in a group, and also allow them to present their assignments in different formats. So maybe not just written, but also in video or audio recording formats. And also important, allow for mistakes. For learners' mistakes, but also for your own mistakes. Because probably as a teacher, setting the example of making a mistake in a lesson is not at all problematic. Okay, so just to take this into account where we said keep it simple, let's now have a look at a video on how that is created by one of our other flying cows, Ntombi, who unfortunately couldn't be here today due to her graduation obligations, but she did create the video for us. And in that video, she'll shares with us how you can set an assignment on the Oxford EduZone platform. Will you please start the video, Thokozile?
Good day, agents of change. Now, a lot of teachers spend most of their time administering assessments, This includes setting the assessment, coming up with a memorandum or with a marking guideline, administering the assessment to learners, checking who wrote and who didn't, marking the assessment, recording the assessment, and also analyzing the assessment results. Now that's a lot to be done in such a small period of time, but that's where Oxford EduZone comes in. Oxford EduZone helps teachers to save valuable teaching and learning time. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how you can make assessments or administer assessment in a blink of an eye. Now this that you see in front of you is a teacher dashboard on Oxford EduZone. So what you do to administer assessment, you go to where it says assessments. Click on the drop down arrow, go to standard tests. Now on standard tests, you will see that you have a bank of assessments that you can use, whereby if you decide to use those ones, you just click on them and administer the test to learners. But if you want to set a new standard test, then you can just click on the cross where it says new standard test. You click on where it says assign test, then you indicate already here the test is already assigned to classes. So what you can do, or what you have to do when you get here, you need to type the class name and also assign to groups. That's if you don't want to send or to assign the test to the whole class. After doing that, you click on where it says save. Okay, now going to the student portal, whenever you send an assessment, it will indicate as a notification on to the learners portal where it says assessment. They will have a number here to show that there are new assessments that have just got in. So when the learners click on where it says assessment, it will direct them to the assessments that have already been assigned to them. Now the one that we just assigned is this one, CA Dance Theory, right? Now the learner will just click on the assessment and then they will be directed to the assessment window where they can resume or start the assessment. So the assessment is self-marking. It also indicates that it has 8 questions and it has no time limit. Now this is how the test looks like on the student view. Now they're able to answer the question and save and then move to another question. Answer the question, save, and then move to another question and so on. Now after the learners have completed the test, we will now go back to the teacher's view and then see or evaluate the test. Now to evaluate or to see the progress of the learners with regards to the assessment, the teacher has to go to where it says evaluation under assessment. You'll be able to see student attempts and you'll be able to see the assigned dates, and you can also check for accumulation report. You can also check for a cumulative report. On the cumulative report, you are able to see all the learners that the assessment was assigned to. You're able to see all the questions that they have written and the questions that they have got right and the questions that they got incorrect. And then you can also check the average time spent doing the assessment. Then you can even opt to export the assessment then you can even opt to export the report to Excel.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any questions on that? On setting assignments and having it. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, let's continue. I'm looking at the time and I'm seeing I've actually been taking a bit of time going through the first 2 webinars where actually we have a lot more to cover. So I'm going to speed it up a bit, moving to, if there's no questions on the content for webinar 2, I'm moving straight into the content for webinar 3, but maybe we don't, yeah?
We've got a comment from Fiona. She says, wow, that uses big data beautifully. And she says, well done.
Okay, great. Now, wonderful. Thank you for that comment, Fiona. Okay, so the last 2 webinars are not that long ago, so I'm sure you still remember a lot of it. So in our Bloom's Digital Taxonomy webinar, we looked at what Bloom's originally looked like. I think 1956, Mr. Bloom designed it. And we know where we use Bloom's for. It's areas for designing assessments, plan curriculum, facilitate questioning, collaborating with other teachers, and planning your lessons. We've got the lower order thinking skill, or the LOTS, which looks more at concrete thinking, memorization, and understanding. And the higher order thinking skills, the HOTS, abstract, critical, metacognitive, and creative thinking. And then in the early 2000s, the new Bloom's Digital Taxonomy came. It looks a bit fresher on this slide. And that's also because it is. And you can see that it became more active verbs. So from knowledge, we went to remember. Oh, let me switch on my laser pointer. That makes life a bit easier for you to watch. Comprehension became understand. Application became apply. Analysis became analyze. Synthesis, evaluate. Oh, sorry, no. So, and this was flipped. So synthesis and evaluation was flipped. Evaluate became this level, and then on top came the creation level. When looking at Bloom's digital taxonomy, it's using obviously the latest part of the latest edition of Bloom's, and then looking at which digital tools and supports, digital tools can support the lower order thinking skills. So there you can think examples like quizzes, flashcards, mind maps. And for example, Kahoot, we'll do a short Kahoot quiz just now. And which digital tools can assist you to challenge the higher order thinking skills? For example, in our natural science textbook, there's an example where we can, oh, that's not natural sciences, Toko, your video is looking at geography. Is this a good point to show your geography example?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let's do that. So we've got another short video that's been prepared by Tokozila that looks a bit more at the higher order thinking skills and how you can assist your learners with those in using Oxford EduZone. So let me stop sharing here. And Tokozila can start her video.
We will be looking at a geography activity on EduZone. Now, in your library, it's where you're going to find your textbook. When you go into your textbook, you will see that you have contents where you get the contents of your textbooks, and you also have resources. And under web links, that's where we're going to find the activity we're going to be doing today. The activity is revise distance calculations. This is how the activity looks. And in the activity, the learners get hints that they can use that are used to assist them on how to calculate distance and how to convert units. When the learners type in their answer, or after they have typed in their answer, they can go to the reveal answer button where they're going to be saying the correct answer. Looking at the correct answer, the learners are then able to compare the answers and see where they went wrong in their original answer. They're also able to redo the activity and get it right the second time.
Okay, so that's an example of a geography activity where we're looking at the higher order thinking skills. Okay, something happened here that I'm now suddenly seeing subtitles, which is not what I want.
Whilst he's sorting that, Xolile says, I'm attending a lot of educational webinars. I've never met something like this. Honestly, keep up the excellent standard. You are very organized, easy to access information, easy to understand. Really, I don't know what to say. Keep it up. Well done. All your presentations were very informative. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's so wonderful to hear. Thank you so much, Olila. That encourages us to keep going. Thank you so much.
Oh, so she also says, we are looking forward for more informative sessions. Once again, thank you so much for excellent certificates of attendance. We appreciate.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so and if we go back, what we did in the Bloom's Digital Taxonomy webinar was also look now, how do you activate these digital examples in the classroom? So apart from what Thokozile just did, we looked at an example where at each of these levels, a CAT teacher assessed their learners' understanding or the learners' levels in Bloom's taxonomy while preparing to build for a website. So I'm just going to give a few of the examples. So on the remember level, the teacher presented the learners with a text on all the information that they needed to have to build a website. And then she said a test for them, so they could make sure that they understood what was going on. And the higher they got, the more they had to do. So, for example, at the analyze level, the teacher would set, maybe here apply. Here they had to create a plan for how they were going to build their website. So a content plan and an action plan, how they came from thinking about their website to really start building their website. For analyzing, we then had to have them look at different website building platforms that they could use and look at the criteria that were relevant for them. So, and based on those criteria, they then had to decide which of the platforms they were going to use. An evaluate level was where they were looking at plans that were made by their peers, and they also had to critique those, taking into account what the elements of building a website are. And then obviously the last step in this whole process was where the learners actually started building the website. So that's Bloom's digital taxonomy in action in a CAT classroom with learners building a website. So are there any questions on Bloom's digital taxonomy?
Fiona says design thinking for higher order, TS. Not sure about the TS.
Yes, that's definitely design thinking. Absolutely. Okay, and the last webinar we had was last week, where we spoke about the key 21st century learning skills, or the 4 C's, as we also know them. And actually, what's relevant in that part is that we look at our learners that have to go to work in a what we call VUCA world. And VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, with increasingly technology driven. So what skills do we need to give them so that they will find their own way and build a meaningful future for themselves? So we're looking at critical thinking, which includes reasoning effectively and solve problems. Creativity. This is the ability of learners to think creatively, but also to work creatively with others and also very relevant, how do you implement your creative ideas? Communication, where they need to have different communication skills, where they need so oral and written. They need to, yeah.
Sorry for disturbing you. You're not presenting.
Sorry, what do you mean?
We don't see the slides.
You don't see the slides?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So when did you stop seeing them?
After Bloom's taxonomy or after the video.
Oh, okay. Oh, so we didn't go back again to.
Go back to the slides.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you for alerting me to that. I was on a roll. Okay. So there we go again. So we spoke about critical thinking, creativity, and we were still with communication. So communication is also listening skills, but also communicating in different, now my laser pointer is off again. Okay, there we go. Communication in different contexts and environments, which I also think is very relevant in our diverse society with diversity of languages and backgrounds. So that's also relevant. And to be able to use multiple media and technologies to communicate. Collaboration is an important one. So this is the ability of learners to work in teams, to be flexible there, to have shared responsibility in teams so they learn how to compromise, and also to know how to use digital tools to collaborate with others. So you see these digital tools are right here in the middle. Now then we had an interesting discussion because it's clear that in the South African CAPS, part of CAPS is that, and the minister keeps repeating that, is that CAPS, that we should be, the schooling system should be producing learners who are able to identify and solve problems, work effectively as individuals, organize and manage themselves, collect, analyze, organize, and critically evaluate information, communicate effectively using visual, symbolic, and language skills, use science and technology effectively and critically, and demonstrate an understanding of the world as a set of related systems by recognizing that problem-solving contexts do not exist in isolation. So that's actually a bit task, and it's not really necessarily, it's not part of one specific subject. It's actually, it goes across all the subjects. And the debate we had last week is whether it's great that CAPS states this, but are schools really implementing it? And there were some different opinions on that. Okay, so but that's in short what the 21st Century Learning Skills webinar looked like. And I actually want to just push ahead. I had a small quiz, but looking at the time, it would be a waste if we couldn't get into the next slide. So if you're okay with that, I'm gonna skip the quiz for now and just go straight into the next element. Is everybody okay with that? No feedback? Okay, then we just go ahead. Because it's interesting to see, because it's a lot of content that we've covered in these 4 webinars and that we now reviewed in the past, what is it, just over an hour. But obviously what's interesting is to see, because that will also help you prevent some cognitive overload, is how these elements work together and why they are relevant. So, and I'm actually looking at it from the last webinar and what we were saying about how important it is that we as a schooling system, produce learners who have these skills. And what came up in the debate last week was, well, how can we give them those skills if we don't have those ourselves? And that's actually where we come back to the topic of the first webinar, where we were looking at how we as teachers need to look at the digital teaching change frame and have an understanding of the 21st century transformative pedagogical strategy, and become more aware of the effective use of digital tools and resources so that we can move towards digital learning. So this is the why, because this is what we want to produce in our learners. And if we as teachers want to teach our learners this, we need to learn that ourselves. And what we spoke about in webinar 1, that's how we can do it. And the next step then related, what we spoke about, these 21st century pedagogical strategies, come together in webinar 2, where we spoke about the tips and tricks, but also about that transactional distance and about managing synchronous and asynchronous activities, and looking at managing cognitive overload. Let's work together, where we look at collaboration and better communication of our learners. So suddenly there's a link again with those 21st century skills. So from the tips and tricks that we discussed, we move back again into the 21st century learning skills and communication and collaboration. The next element we then get is from these 21st century learning skills to Bloom's. Because actually, especially creativity and critical thinking, that's where we're talking about the higher order thinking skills from Bloom's. So that's the logical link there. And then the next step, oh, sorry, I pushed the wrong button, is moving back to our teaching change frame, because this will help us with assessment, digital assessment. How do we assess what our learners are able to do? Do they remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create? What are digital tools and resources that we can use for that? So this is how actually all the webinars come together in one overview. Does that make sense to you? Does this give you a better understanding of the content we've been dealing with over the past 4 weeks, and actually over the past hour and a half?
I haven't got an answer for that one, but Kolile was asking if we can. She says Bloom's taxonomy was informative, but can you just repeat on how to set assessments on EduZone? So I'm not sure how that can be elaborated to her.
Okay, so let's see if we can, if you can watch the webinar again, Olila, then you can see the video that Tombi created on setting the assessment. But we're also willing, if that would help you, are you working actively with Oxford EduZone? Because I think what would also be useful for you is maybe if we have a one-on-one session where we take you through setting the assignment on Oxford EduZone. That's not a problem at all.
Okay, Kolile's note hasn't come back to us, but Fiona says yes, it has shown her how everything is interconnected.
Okay, great, wonderful. And then obviously, Oxford EduZone is there, to support you on those various levels. So from assessment to finding assignments and providing digital content to your learners. Okay. And actually what I then wanted to do is have a deeper look at, how do you measure your progress on the teaching change frame? So initially we just looked at 4 quadrants, but here you can see it a bit more in the different steps that you can take along the way. And we had prepared some examples of lessons, to show a bit what the difference could be. So, for example, and I must tell you, so please download that framework for professional development and digital learning from DBE, because you'll find this information in that framework. And if the deeper you delve, it's quite a hefty document, but the deeper you delve into it and combine it with the annexes that are available, it starts to come alive for you. And it's actually a valuable document. I'm sad for the DBE that not so many teachers are aware of its existence. So here it will show you the steps that you can take and how you can progress, either from moving from teacher-centered or teacher-directed to learner-centered, and moving from a limited use of digital tools and resources to effective use of tools and resources. So an example that we could look at is where the teacher here at this level. So the example is from Life Science, grade 10, History of Life on Earth. Now on Oxford EduZone, you also find the Life Sciences book. And if you look at limited use, but still some use of digital tools and resources, it could be that the teacher displays a video to the class to introduce the topic of History of Life on Earth. So that's a simple way. It's teacher-directed, it's a video. If you start moving to blending teacher and learning centered, then the teacher pauses the video and stops at strategic moments. And then the learners have to apply what they have learned to a timeline that they are constructing. So this video could be about, the history of life on Earth. At the same time, the learners sit, that can be on a digital, on a slide that they're creating, or on a Word document, or they maybe just used pen and paper. They're creating a timeline. So every time the teacher pauses the video, they can add to their timeline. So that you already move to the next part. And if we look at one here, where it's becoming more learner-centered, but not yet that digitally enhanced, the teacher can connect the classroom with correct me if I say this wrong, but is coelacanth, this old prehistoric fish. So I probably pronounced it completely wrong. Coelacanth. Expert, and the learners can pose questions about the methods of dating fossils. So this could, for example, be you're sitting in the classroom and the teacher has made contact with this expert via a Zoom connection, and then learners can ask questions of this expert. So this is increased more and more learner-centered pedagogical approaches. Now, if we start looking at the top, so I'm sort of skipping, maybe I won't do the top one, but using a much more, in a situation where there's more awareness and effective use of digital tools and resources. That's where a teacher can provide learners with links to YouTube videos, which they can watch at home. And she can even provide these links from videos that are available in the book from Oxford EduZone, so she can assign them as homework. So the learners will be doing an asynchronous activity. And here, where it's a blend of teacher and learner centered, is where learners research online and create a presentation that responds to a simple open question about the origins of life in a region in South Africa. If we move a step further, learner-centered and learner interaction and knowledge building, that's where learners design their own website with the focus on unanswered questions about key events in fossil formation in South Africa. And then the last one, independent digital learning, collaboration and content creation. This is where learners collaborate online to create a predictive study on the introduction of a species. So these examples help these make this teaching change frame come alive a bit for you.
Tazeen,
Yeah.
we've got a few questions.
Okay.
The first one that Wuhang says, how can we work with Oxford University Press to find more development?
Okay. So, okay. So can we pause those for the end of the webinar?
Okay,
Can we please have please can we focus on the questions that we have now on the content that we're now presenting?
Okay, Fiona says she can't see the visual that you're presenting. So is there a way for them to see it more clearly?
You mean this overview? Okay, okay. Yeah. No, so we'll also share these slides, and you can see this overview. Yeah, I don't know how to make it better. Can make it maybe a bit bigger, but then it goes out of the. Okay. Other questions? While I'm trying to. Let me maybe take this off.
She just sent a message that she's got it now.
Okay, I've made it a bit bigger. I don't know if that helps, and so maybe if we can ignore the pedagogy error, then it's a bit more visible. Like this. Is this better?
Yes, you say it's okay.
Okay, great. Okay. So, and if we then come to the last part, so we go back to TPEC. And if you say, well, I want to move on this teaching change frame and I want to start using TPEC in my lessons, what is a good checklist for me to see if the lesson I've presented is has it been a good digital learning lesson? So the questions that are provided for that is, one, did I maintain curriculum focus while teaching my lesson? So did I meet my objectives? 2, did I actively engage my learners in higher order thinking and interactive activities? 3rd one, did I make the best use of digital tools that are available? And remember, the more digital tools doesn't necessarily mean the best use. So it's really looking at, does the use of this specific digital tool that I selected help the learner in better learning the lesson? Was I able to find and use effective digital content? So, for example, the interactive book on Oxford EduZone, did that help in presenting my lesson? Have digital tools and resources facilitated assessment? Have they made life easier for me and maybe also for the learner? And lastly, are my learners likely to be more skilled and have better understanding of the subject content? And that's actually a yes or no. So more skilled, that's looking back to the 21st century learning skills and better understanding of the subject content. Do you think this digital learning lesson checklist will help you? Going for. What I think is relevant for us to look at is the resources for your further reading. Every webinar comes with a list of these resources, but for these, I thought what would be specifically relevant is to have the access to that DBE Professional Development Framework for Digital Learning. As I said before, it's part of your handouts in the webinar today, but also maybe log on to the DBE Teacher Professional Development Portal. So you only have to click on this link. So you can do an online self-assessment to see where you can position yourself on the teaching change frame and in which direction your professional development could work. And then coming back to the question about Oxford EduZone, you can find more information about Oxford EduZone by clicking on this link. And maybe we can copy that link in the chat. And maybe Derek can contribute something about how participants to the webinar can find out more about Oxford University Press and about Oxford EduZone.
Yes, I'm happy to add some content. So I will be sending everyone a little bit more information after the webinars about EduZone and how to set up trials and have a consultant come to you and do a demo. So that will go out with the certificates and the link to the YouTube channel to go and watch the videos.
Okay, great. And can I also suggest that we might also create a link where, because we've got it in the handouts now, but maybe people don't have time to download all the handouts, that we can also have a place where people, maybe a Google folder, a Google Drive folder, or a WeTransfer thing where we can have all the slides and participants' manuals uploaded.
Yes, that's perfect. I'll do that as well.
Okay, no, great. And let's do that. Okay, so we're running out of time a bit. Do people still want to do a poll with us, please?
What that course is about. We have time. We can stream with these things all day. People are interested.
Okay. So the poll's gone. The poll's gone. Okay, so we can't do the poll because the poll is gone. I'm sorry about that. Okay, then let me go back to the, I don't know what happened there. It was really, oh, there it is again. Great. Okay, people who were with us in the first webinar, we asked questions about embracing digital skills in the classroom and how you feel about it. So please submit your answer. Do you feel like you've dived in head first and ... you can add that in the chat. Do you feel, and so and after this whole series of webinars, that I must add. So before you might felt like you were drowning, but did these webinars contribute something, or are you drowning even more now? So after attending these webinars, how do you feel about digital learning skills? I have dived in head first and I'm in the water, but just floating along because I am drowning because I'm a confident swimmer because. So you can add, you can put your answers in. And if you want, you can add why you feel like you feel now in the chat. Wonderful to see. We've got 5 responses so far, and I see people feeling like confident swimmers, which is great, because I remember the poll from the first webinar, and we had people who are in the water and just floating along. Some people were drowning. So if it's only one, that's what I've always learned about education. If we only have the impact on one of our learners to become better, then we've done a great job. So if it's one of you participants, and if it's like this 6 participants who've moved from maybe floating along to becoming confident swimmer, then I'm very pleased and happy. And thank you so much for that. So let me just quickly move to the closing. Here we go. I think I'm still sharing. Let's go back there. Okay, those were the resources. So we just done the poll. And now let's quickly meet the training objectives. After attending the webinar, do you recall the topics from our previous 4 webinars? Realize how the topics of the previous webinars are linked? Toko, I need to help you share with me if we get some feedback. Have a deeper understanding of how the teaching change frame guides your professional development for digital learning.
Yeah, sent it to on WhatsApp.
And know how to analyze your digital lessons. And do you realize how Oxford EduZone could support you on your digital learning journey? Okay, we already saw some feedback. So what's relevant for us? So Tokozile, if you could please share the link in the chat to complete the short workshop feedback form. Because remember, people who complete both the workshop attendance register and the workshop feedback form will receive a certificate of attendance via email. And then let me say thank you. But before we do that, let me go quickly check the chat and see the feedback. Thank you so much. And I was going to say something else and I've lost the plot. Sorry about that. Okay, so I hope everybody, oh yeah, so what I wanted to say, there's the sticky message on top. You can still join our WhatsApp group where we can update you on the links to the other webinars and to the handouts and the participants manuals, or can ask any questions that still linger with you, or maybe set up an individual session so we can show you how to set up the assignments on Oxford EduZone. If there are no more questions, then it's been a great pleasure presenting these webinars for you. And it's been wonderful to meet you. And I'm especially happy to see people who've been with us from webinar number 1. I think I'm going to miss you next week. We must make a plan to start doing something else. But thank you so much for your attention. And I really hope this has helped you in your digital learning journey. Thank you very much for Oxford University Press for providing the platform and the opportunity, to Tokozile for being my loyal facilitator and knowledgeable facilitator. Let's not forget about that. And thank you, Derek, for being there on the side and always helping with technical issues. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.